Who am I?
Richard Kazimer, media veteran.
Why I got in radio is because I'm good with a knife.
Contributor in Perth, Australia.
Our friend Richard Kazimer in the United States.
How are you guys enjoying the 19th century? Is that working out for you? How can you say, I'm not making fun of you as a race, I'm making fun of you as black performers?
I think as a country, Americans are as patriotic as the most rabid UK football hooligan.
Who am I?
Richard S. Kazimer.
Balls Radio.
So all around the world, it seems, except Australia, I notice, petrol prices are going down. They've slid in the UK. They've slid in the United States. Now, Barack Obama seems he's got a lot to answer for over in the US because he's getting blamed when petrol prices are too high, or gas prices, gasoline prices, as they call them over there. And now they're the lowest they've been in 4 years. And apparently that's all the president's fault as well. To try and shed some light and and apply some common sense to all of this. Richard Kazimer is our man in the United States, so he can do no right by the sounds of it.
I shall do my best trying to explain this madness, but it is par for the course. Now, due in large part to the decrease in U.S. consumer demand for gasoline due to the energy efficiency in the cars that we've had in the last 10 years or so, the standards that have been imposed in the car industry. There's also been an increase in domestic production. There's been a drop in world crude prices. And what it's done is it's reduced the price at the pump in the United States to a 4-year low. We're paying $3 and sometimes even less a gallon for gasoline. Now, that's good news for the U.S. consumer, who now, as we approach the holiday season, has more disposable income. But it's also bad news for the Wall Street speculators who make their living investing in supply and demand economics. Now, the bigger the demand and the smaller supply means that it's a higher market value. Well, that's not the case with gasoline now because there's more gasoline out there, and therefore the prices have dropped. And as you were saying, the political rally cry of reducing U.S. dependence on foreign oil has now come to fruition because, again, there's more crude oil that we're pumping out of our own soil here in the United States than we have back in the 1980s. Now, that huge increase in production during the Obama administration is also much to the consternation of a lot of environmentalists who are opposed to any drilling here in the U.S. But you'd think that the right-wing media would be behind this, and as you mentioned, they are not, because they blame Obama when the prices are high. And now they're saying that he's ruining the economy by dropping the gas prices down to $3 or less because, because they're all in favor of the Wall Street investors. So he cannot win.
Do they think the president gets up in the morning and goes and has a list of things and he just goes, now, how much are we going to charge for gasoline this week and bread and milk? I'll put those up a little bit. Is that the way they think it works? The president actually sets the prices for all of these things? These people are supposed to be capitalists. I would have thought they'd sort of have a bit of an idea about the way the world worked.
Well, how they think, they meaning the Republicans and the right-wing media, is irrelevant to what they want you to think. So if they want you to think, especially now as we approach this week, the midterm elections, and then in 2 years, the presidential elections, they want you to think that whoever is in charge is responsible for all the social and economic ills of this country. So it is a political chess piece, and they will use it regardless of the fact that it is absolutely based on lies.
By the way, talking about the midterms, it looks like according to the opinion polls, although they can always be wrong as well, it's not looking that good for it's looking good for the Republicans from what I've seen. Okay,
but understand too that the media will not just fold their tents and say, well, this is a wash. It's either party is going to win. Nothing more to see here. They're going to keep the intensity level as high as they can right up until the election so that you can watch on television or watch online the results. So they are just building this anxiety. It is still a horse race. It is still too close to call. There are some states where it's a given that Republicans will win. But is it a guarantee that the Republicans will win control of the Senate? Absolutely not.
Well, one thing they can't do, the Republicans, they can't say, well, look, we're going to take the gas prices lower because, damn it, Barack's already been there and done it. Mind you, you have to, you are so lucky over there because you're, $3 per gallon. That's about 80 cents, I think, per litre. which is about, getting on for, and it's always been this case, about half what it is here in Australia. It's about 100, well, a little bit more than half. It's about 130 cents per litre here in our money. And in the UK, they're about £1.25 per litre. So that's about $2 per litre. So you're paying 80 cents. In the UK, they're paying $2. That's a quantum difference. So you're pretty lucky on how much you pay for your gas over there.
We are lucky. We have been lucky. I remember when gasoline was under $1 a gallon. That's how old I am. But the things change so fast here. The cost of living, the consumer price index has shot up quite a bit in a very short period of time. But as you say, we are lucky. But again, going back to the auto bailout, that was the stipulation when Barack Obama bailed out these auto companies with government money, which they have paid back. The stipulation was you start making cars that are far more fuel efficient, or this is the last time you get bailed out. And they did. The big three stepped up.
Good. Makes sense. Now, while we're still talking oil, that oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, BP's oil spill, continues to make news. A spin doctor for BP, for British Petroleum, has been trying to argue that, it wasn't that bad, really, was it?
Oh, heavens, no. And to go back a little bit in history here, this all happened in April of 2010. The world witnessed one of the most devastating man-made disasters in world history. Approximately 172 million gallons of crude oil spewed into the Gulf of Mexico from this underwater blowout at the Deepwater Horizon rig that is owned by British Petroleum. Several workers were killed in the rig explosion. Commercial fishing, Gulf state tourism brought to a complete standstill during the cleanup. And in the end, 10 million gallons of oil settled on the bottom of the ocean floor out there in the Gulf, about the size of the state of Rhode Island. Now, even though the recovery efforts and also the economic rebound is nothing short of Herculean, there was a recent report by the National Academy of Science that indicates 4 years later, about 1,235 square miles of this bathtub ring is still on the ocean floor. This clown, Jeff Mitchell, he's the senior vice president for communications for British Petroleum, had an article that appeared this week in the political magazine online news service Politico. And the title of the article was No, BP Didn't Ruin the Gulf. He's suggesting that there is no residual damage down there at all, that the Gulf, in fact, has this inherent resilience to environmental disaster. And he said that the public overreacted on the disaster. He cites that many natural disasters, such as soil erosion and hurricanes, have far more impact on it. But the bottom line is that after a hurricane, you can still eat the seafood in the Gulf, which you couldn't for a couple of years down there. And
you were saying it's and the oil, it's the type of oil as well. It was a good oil that they had. They were spilling a good oil, rather
sweet
than
oil. They call it sweet oil.
Yeah. That sounds so much better, doesn't it?
Yeah.
People going, oh, that tastes nice.
I doubt that he's pouring it on his Waldorf salad as we speak. To their credit, Politico also ran a response from the Ocean Conservancy Restoration Director, Cara Langford. And her article was called, Yes, BP Did Damage the Gulf, and she cited a lot more credible scientific data than BP's whitewashing. Keep in mind, too, Phil, that it's going to take a few years and a few generations of monitoring the seafood down there and the crustaceans and whatnot and the wildlife to figure out if there's any lasting damages. We have seen some. The Gulf is resilient, but resilient to a point. Do you now want to eat any seafood that has been ingesting these microparticles of something that is not consumable?
All right. Well, look, someone who's very close to this show works for BP in industrial hygiene. I'm sure he'd sit on probably on the same side as their spin doctor. But I can't understand, wherever the truth lies. Now, I think we all believe that BP is trying to tell us that things are great when they're not really, and obviously not. But if you were the spin doctor for BP, wouldn't you just shut the fuck up? Why would you write an article just to evoke people's angst? Why?
Well, yes, that's a good point. And we had also talked about this a few episodes ago, is that BP is still facing a myriad of lawsuits. They paid for the cleanup. They did pay for some damages and whatnot. They have settled with the gentleman who perished in the explosion. But as years go on and we see the environmental impact, that people are still filing suit, because a lot of people down there, PB initially went out and wanted people, especially the fishermen, to sign waivers saying, look, you'll accept this token settlement and therefore you will never sue us. And the smart ones said, I don't think so, because we haven't seen the end of this. So BP is still facing a lot of lawsuits. So what they're doing is they're doing this little CYA preemptive strike, saying, well, look at all we've done. And gosh, it's really not that bad. Bottom line is, do you put motor oil on your food? The answer is no.
No, not normally. Now, I talked about this last week, actually, right at the beginning of the program, that the West's fear of Ebola is just that. It's fear. We're talking about Ebola in the news because we're worried about it coming to our shores. We're less worried about the fact that thousands of people are dying in Africa from Ebola. If we were worried about that, we'd be worried about the hundreds of thousands who are dying from all sorts of other diseases, a lot of them related to poor sanitation in Africa. This is just an example of just how selfish we are in the West, that, we're talking about Ebola now because it might come to us. And the same thing is happening in this country as is happening in the US, where people who've gone out and selflessly volunteered to go and help and try and tackle this epidemic in Western Africa, the nurses and the health workers, they're coming back, and it seems like they're being treated like pariahs.
Yes, and indeed, it's been a week of everybody playing Ebola ball for party posturing. As we mentioned last week, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie called for a widespread 21-day quarantine for anybody returning from treating the Ebola patients in West Africa. Now, Christie made good on his panic by forcibly quarantining a nurse, Casey Hickok, for a few days in this makeshift plastic isolation tent in New Jersey, even though Hickok showed no signs of the virus at all. And finally, the Obama administration stepped in after a couple of days, ordered her release, and also told the New York Governor Cuomo to cease and desist his same quarantine policy. Now, mind you, the still virus-free Hickox, she returned to her home state of Maine up in Fort Kent, which is near the Canadian border, to resume what she thought was going to be just her normal life. Well, forget about it. Maine Governor Paul LePage, he's this Tea Party darling, and he's also up for re-election in the next couple of days. He's listed as one of the worst governors in Maine history, if not the country. He immediately ordered Nurse Hickox to stay at home and not have any contact with any other human being until otherwise cleared to do so. She said, funk that, and she went on a bike ride, chased down by the state police and all the media. Yeah, and what happened was he then got a court order to limit her movements, which was then immediately overturned by a federal judge. This isn't even the end of it. Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal sent a letter to the American Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. They're holding their annual conference in New Orleans this week. Jindal had his health officials send the society a letter saying, we're asking you to ban anyone who has ever been to these West African countries that have Ebola. We do not want them to come to New Orleans to speak to the effects and how to stop the Ebola virus. You cannot make it up.
That is incredible, isn't it? Yeah. So they just say, yes, stay away. Don't come here. We don't want your sort. You medical professional. We don't want your sort here. Go away. Leave us alone. How backward can you get? That is frightening, isn't it? Yeah. Now, I tell you what is also backward, the fact that this is news. So Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, has come out as gay. In this day and age, isn't that a bit like someone saying, look, I have to confess, I am short-sighted. I mean, it's not such a big deal anymore, is it?
It is not, except it is in the business world, which is one of the reasons that he did it. Now, he's the Apple CEO. He replaced the late Steve Jobs. He wrote an article this week in Bloomberg Business Week, and he publicly announced the not-so-secret revelation that he's gay. He takes pride in his sexual orientation. He's considering it as one of the greatest gifts that his God has given him. He credits being gay for giving him a much deeper understanding of what it means to be a minority, about all the challenges in life, of building confidence, and also being an advocate for doing good things in the world for all people. Now, You might think at first blush that Cook's coming out would be a detriment to Apple and the brand, but it's not. The stock market, their shares are through the roof. And unlike Steve Jobs, who was so private that we didn't know, most Americans, I think I dare say most people in the world, didn't know he was married, didn't know that he was adopted, didn't know that he was of Syrian descent until after he died. Now, Cook's disclosure now puts a nice human face that everyone can relate to on a brand that is world renowned. In total opposition of that, things aren't so forgiving up in Toronto, Canada, where Jian Ghomeshi, he's a very popular host of this great program on the CBC called The Q with Jian Ghomeshi. It's an interview show, and he interviews people from all walks of life. He had a very exclusive interview a couple of weeks ago with Julian Assange, the very hard to get Barbara Streisand, authors, musicians, you name it. The guy had a band for many years. He's won Juno Awards in Canada. And what Ghomeshi did, he was recently fired by the CBC last week when it was revealed that, and Ghomeshi actually revealed it to his network heads, that he was going to be the target of a freelance article that he cited was coming directly from a jilted or an ex-girlfriend about Ghomeshi's practice in the bedroom of consensual rough sex or BDSM or kink, as it's called. The CBC looked at it and said, you know what? We got enough evidence here to sack your butt. And they fired him. And now he's suing them for $55 million for defamation. Right. So here's something this guy did in the privacy.
He's not denying. Yeah, that's right. So he's not denying. He's saying, no, this is the way I have sex.
Yes.
He's not saying that, he's not denying that, but they're getting rid of him because of that.
Exactly. Now, mind you that up until this happened, no one had ever come forward, and as long as he's been doing the show for 7 years or so, no one has ever come forward and said, this guy abused me, this guy is odd, he's violent against women. No one has ever come forward, except now that it's been revealed, now that he's been sacked, women are coming forward, which you have to then look into the many facets of violence against women. The reason women do not come forward because of their fear of their own safety, their careers, and everything else. So this is a story that has some legs to it. It is unfortunately because I listened to Ghomeshi on a nightly basis. I think, again, he's one of the best people in the business. And for this to happen is just strange as far as media is concerned. But if there's some good that comes of this, then I'm all for it.
Seems to be something about radio. I was going to say radio stars. I don't know. Do we still have radio stars? I don't think so. But anyway, it seems to be something to do with people who talk behind a microphone. I mean, we've got this huge scandal where almost everyone who worked for Radio 1 in the UK during the 70s is now up for charges either of sexual abuse of women or of paedophilia. No bestiality so far. Still waiting for that one. But it seems to be that, they're all being found out one by one. I'm not saying this guy is innocent or guilty. It just seems to be something to do with a medium. Or maybe it's just, it's a slice of life and, you're always going to find this.
Well, I'm waiting for my first scandal, and that's why I hooked up with you, brother.
Yeah, I know. There we are. Wait, you and me. What a scandal that would be.
I mean, I can't get arrested.
But we've never even been in the same country at the same time. Anyway, all right. Good to talk. We'll see you again next week. Thanks.
All right, brother. Take care.